The January wind cut through my thin black dress as I stood outside the Westbrook Funeral Home in Burlington, Vermont. My Aunt Carol's service was starting in 20 minutes, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside yet. I needed a moment to prepare for the sympathetic looks, the awkward hugs, and the inevitable questions about my mother, who hadn't returned for her own sister's funeral. "Emily?" A voice called from behind me. I turned to see my cousin Megan, Carol's daughter, bundled in a thick wool coat. Her eyes were puffy from crying, but she managed a weak smile. "I thought that was you. Thanks for coming." I hugged her tightly. "Of course I came." "I'm so sorry, Meg." We hadn't seen each other in almost 5 years, not since I'd moved to Boston for graduate school. The distance wasn't just geographical. Our families had drifted apart after my parents' divorce, and when Mom relocated to Arizona, those connections became even more tenuous. "Dad's inside already, She trailed off, wiping a tear. "Well, you know how he is, keeping busy with arrangements so he doesn't have to feel anything." Uncle Robert had always been the stoic type, handling emotions by burying himself in tasks. Some things never change, even when your wife of 38 years dies suddenly of a stroke. The funeral home was warm and smelled of lilies and furniture polish. About 50 people had gathered. Some I recognized from childhood visits, others complete strangers. I signed the guest book and followed Megan to the front row where Uncle Robert stood greeting mourners. "Emily," he said, embracing me stiffly. "Thank you for coming. Your mother send any word?" I shook my head. "I'm sorry. She sent flowers, but it's fine." He cut me off, his jaw tightening. Carol would have understood, but I could tell from his expression that he didn't understand, and neither did I, really. My mother and Aunt Carol had been close once. I had memories of them laughing in Carol's kitchen, sharing stories over coffee, while Megan and I played in the backyard. Whatever had driven them apart remained a mystery to me. The service was lovely, but standard. Hymns, readings, and heartfelt eulogies that painted Carol as the generous, spirited woman she'd been. I sat quietly, letting memories wash over me. Summers at Lake Champlain, Thanksgiving dinners, the Christmas Carol had taught me to make her famous apple pie. Small moments that suddenly felt precious now that there would never be more of them. After the service, Robert asked me to help sort through some of Carol's personal items at their house. "She'd want you to have some mementos," he said. And frankly, I could use the help. Their colonial-style home looked exactly as I remembered it, though somehow smaller. Family photos lined the hallway, Carol's life displayed chronologically, from her childhood through her wedding, Megan's birth, family vacations, and recent holidays. My mother appeared in many of the earlier photos, the sisters standing arm in arm, looking so similar with their auburn hair and bright smiles. "I'll start with her desk," Robert said, leading me to Carol's small home office. "Megan's taking care of the clothing donations. If you could sort through these papers, separate anything important, bills, insurance, that sort of thing." I nodded, settling into Carol's chair as he left. The desk was meticulously organized with labeled folders and color-coded notebooks. So typically Carol. I began sorting methodically, creating piles for financial documents, personal correspondence, and items to discard. In the bottom drawer, I found a small wooden box I hadn't seen before. It was hand-carved, with intricate leaf patterns along the edges. No lock, just a simple brass clasp. Inside were bundles of letters, tied with faded ribbon, and several old photographs. One photo caught my eye immediately, my mother and Carol as young women, maybe 20 years old, standing on either side of a young man I didn't recognize. They were at what looked like a lakeside cabin, all three grinning widely. I flipped it over. Carol, Michael, and Rebecca. Green Mountain Summer, 1985. Michael? I'd never heard Carol or my mother mention anyone by that name. Curiosity piqued. I untied one bundle of letters. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting unfamiliar. The first was dated June 12, 1985. Dear Carol, I can't stop thinking about our weekend at the lake. Every time I close my eyes, I see your smile as you stepped out onto the dock that morning. I know we agreed to keep things casual for now, but I need to be honest. I'm falling for you, harder than I expected. I stopped reading, feeling like an intruder. These were clearly love letters from this Michael person. I tied them back up, but as I did, a single envelope fell out from another bundle. Unlike the others, this one was newer, the paper crisp and white. It was addressed simply, "To be opened after my death." My heart began to race. This was exactly the kind of thing Robert should know about. I called out for him, but there was no response. He must have gone upstairs. I stared at the envelope. It wasn't sealed, just folded closed. The rational part of me knew I should wait for Robert, but something else, intuition perhaps, made me unfold it. The letter inside was dated just 3 months ago. To my family, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and there are truths I can finally share. I've carried these secrets for too long, and I can't bear the thought of taking them to my grave. First, to Robert. You've been a devoted husband and father, and the guilt of my deception has been my heaviest burden. The truth is that before we met, during that summer of 1985, I fell deeply in love with Michael Calloway. We planned to marry, but tragedy intervened when he was killed in a car accident that October. What no one knew, not even Rebecca, was that I was pregnant with Michael's child when he died. I gasped, my hands trembling. Megan was born in 1986. Was Carol saying that Uncle Robert wasn't Megan's biological father? I was devastated and terrified. When I met Robert 3 months later, he was kind and stable, everything I needed then. Our relationship progressed quickly, and when I told him I was pregnant, he assumed the child was his. I never corrected him. We married, and he has raised Megan as his own daughter from the day she was born. My second confession concerns Rebecca. She never knew about my pregnancy, but she and Michael had a brief relationship before he and I became involved. When he chose me, it created a rift between us that we pretended to repair, but never truly did. Her resentment lingered for years, emerging in subtle ways that damaged our relationship beyond repair. My mother had been involved with this Michael too. A cold realization settled over me. This explained so much. Why Mom always seemed uncomfortable around Uncle Robert, why her relationship with Carol had deteriorated, why she'd moved so far away and rarely returned. I kept reading, my heart pounding. Finally, there's the matter of Michael's family fortune. His parents never knew about the pregnancy. After his death, they established a trust fund that would have gone to any children he might have had. That money, now amounting to over $2 million, rightfully belongs to Megan. The documentation to claim it is with my attorney, William Barrett. I know these revelations will cause pain, and for that, I am deeply sorry. But Megan deserves to know her true heritage, and Robert deserves the truth after all these years of loyalty and love. Forgive me. Carol, I sat frozen, the letter clutched in my hands. The implications were staggering. Megan's paternity, my mother's involvement with Michael, the inheritance. It was too much to process. Footsteps approached, and I looked up to see Uncle Robert standing in the doorway. "Found anything important?" he asked. The letter felt heavy in my hands. How could I possibly tell him that his entire marriage had been built on a lie? That Megan wasn't his biological daughter? In that moment, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. "Uncle Robert," I said quietly, "I think you need to see this." The color drained from Uncle Robert's face as he read Carol's letter. He sank into the chair opposite me, the paper trembling in his hands. 38 years, he whispered. 38 years, and she never told me. I reached across the desk, placing my hand over his. I'm so sorry. He shook his head slowly, eyes fixed on some distant point. Megan isn't mine. His voice cracked. My whole life with Carol was a lie. Not a lie, I said gently. A secret, yes, but she loved you. That much I know is true. Robert's eyes met mine, filled with a pain I couldn't fathom. Does it matter? Love built on deception. What's that worth? He stood abruptly, pacing the small office. And Rebecca? Your mother knew this man too? This explains so much. I nodded, thinking of my mother's strained phone calls with Carol. Over the years, how she'd always find excuses not to visit Vermont. I think it does. We have to tell Megan, he said finally. My stomach nodded. Are you sure? Today? After the funeral? When would be a good time to tell someone their entire identity is a fabrication? He ran his hands through his gray hair. But you're right, not today. She's been through enough. We agreed to wait a week before sharing Carol's confession with Megan. Robert would contact the attorney mentioned in the letter, and I would try, somehow, to get my mother to talk. That night, I stayed in Carol's guest room, unable to sleep. Around midnight, I heard Robert moving around downstairs. I found him in the living room, surrounded by old photo albums, a glass of whiskey in his hand. I keep looking for signs, he said without looking up. Moments where I should have known. How did I miss it? I sat beside him, studying a photo of him holding baby Megan at what appeared to be her christening. His face was alight with pride and love. You didn't miss anything because there was nothing to see, I told him. You're her father in every way that matters. He took a long sip of whiskey. Did I ever tell you how Carol and I met? It was at a New Year's Eve party, 1985. She seemed sad, distant. I spent the whole night trying to make her laugh. A wistful smile crossed his face. When she finally did, it was like the sun coming out. I fell in love with her right then. She was grieving, I said softly, the timeline clicking into place. For Michael, and I was her consolation prize. Bitterness edged his voice. No. You were her choice, her future. Whatever happened before, she chose you every day for nearly 4 decades. He didn't respond, just turned the page of the album. I left him to his memories and returned to my room, where I called my mother despite the late hour. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. Emily, is everything okay? Not really, I said. I'm at Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol's house. We found a letter, Mom, about Michael Calloway. The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I always knew this day would come. You need to come back to Vermont, I told her. There are things we need to discuss as a family. I can't, she whispered. You don't understand what it was like. Then help me understand. Megan deserves the truth, and so does Uncle Robert. After a long pause, she sighed. I'll fly out tomorrow. But Emily, prepare yourself. There's more to this story than what Carol wrote in that letter. I spent the next day helping Robert with funeral thank you notes and insurance paperwork, both of us moving through the motions while our minds raced with unanswered questions. Megan had returned to her apartment in Burlington, needing space, to grieve privately. My mother's flight arrived that evening. I picked her up at the airport, struck by how small she looked, how fragile. At 61, Rebecca Walker still maintained the elegant beauty of her youth, but grief and anxiety had etched new lines around her eyes. How's Robert taking it? She asked, as we drove through the darkness toward Carol's house. About as well as you'd expect, I replied. He feels betrayed, confused, mostly worried about Megan. Mom nodded, staring out the window at the familiar Vermont landscape. I never wanted to come back here. Because of Michael? Her fingers tightened on her purse. Because of all of it. Michael, Carol, the choices we all made. When we arrived, Robert was waiting in the kitchen. The tension was immediate and suffocating as he and my mother faced each other for the first time in years. "Rebecca," he said coolly. "You look well." "Robert." She nodded. "I'm so sorry about Carol." An awkward silence followed, broken only when I suggested we sit in the living room. My mother perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I guess you want to know about Michael," she began. Robert's jaw tightened. "Among other things." She took a deep breath. "We met him that summer at Lake Champlain. His family owned a cabin near ours. He was magnetic, charming, intelligent, from a wealthy Boston family. Both Carol and I were infatuated with him." "And he chose Carol," I prompted. Mom's laugh was hollow. "Eventually, yes, but not at first." She looked directly at Robert. "I was with him first. For most of that summer, actually. Then suddenly, he ended things with me and started seeing Carol. I was devastated." "So you were jealous," Robert said flatly. "Is that why you and Carol grew apart?" "It was more complicated than that." Mom's voice quavered. "After Michael died, Carol changed. She became distant, secretive. I tried to be there for her, but she pushed me away. When she met you and got married so quickly, I was confused but supportive. Then when Megan was born..." "You suspected she wasn't mine," Robert finished. Mom nodded. The timing seemed convenient, but Carol denied it vehemently when I confronted her. We had a terrible fight. She accused me of still being jealous over Michael, of trying to ruin her happiness. Tears filled her eyes. After that, we were never the same. I thought about the two sisters, both in love with the same man, both harboring secrets and resentments that had festered for decades. "Did you ever suspect Megan might be Michael's?" I wondered. Mom admitted. "But I never knew for certain. Carol was so insistent, and over time I convinced myself I was wrong." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "There's something else you should know, something Carol might not have known." Robert and I exchanged glances. "Michael wasn't the person we thought he was," Mom continued. "After his death, I discovered he'd been seeing another woman in Burlington while dating Carol. He had a pattern of manipulation and lies. That doesn't change the fact that he was Megan's biological father," Robert said sharply, "or that Carol lied to me our entire marriage." "No, it doesn't," Mom agreed. "But it might explain why Carol chose you, Robert. Maybe she realized what kind of man Michael really was. Maybe she wanted better for her child." Robert stood abruptly. "I need some air." He walked out onto the back porch, closing the door firmly behind him. Mom turned to me, her expression pleading. "You have to understand, Emily. That summer changed everything. The choices we made, the secrets we kept, they shaped our entire lives." I thought about the ripple effects of those long-ago events. My mother's reluctance to talk about her past, the strained holiday gatherings, the gradual dissolution of our extended family, all stemming from one fateful summer by the lake. "We're telling Megan tomorrow," I said. "She deserves to know the truth." Mom nodded slowly. "Yes, she does. But be gentle. This will rewrite her entire understanding of herself." That night, I barely slept, thinking about identity and truth, about how the stories we tell ourselves shape who we become. I wondered what this revelation would do to Megan, to all of us. Would it tear us further apart? Or could it possibly be the first step toward healing decades-old wounds? Morning came too quickly. I called Megan and asked her to come over, saying only that we had important family matters to discuss. She arrived looking concerned, especially when she saw my mother sitting at the kitchen table. "Aunt Rebecca? What are you doing here?" She glanced between us. "What's going on?" Robert gestured for her to sit. "Sweetheart, we found something in your mother's desk. A letter she wrote, to be read after her death." "A letter?" Megan's brow furrowed. "What did it say?" I reached for her hand as Robert carefully explained Carol's confession. Megan listened, in stunned silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. "That's not possible," she whispered when he finished. "Mom wouldn't have lied about something so important. And you're my father. You've always been my father." "I am your father," Robert said firmly. "Nothing will ever change that. But biologically, it seems this Michael Calloway was your birth father." Megan's eyes darted to my mother. "And you knew him too? You were both involved with him?" Mom nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "So you've all been lying to me my entire life." Megan stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "And now, when Mom isn't even here to defend herself, you're telling me everything I believed about myself is false?" "Megan, please," I began, but she cut me off. "No, Emily, you don't get it. This isn't just about who my biological father was. This is about who I am." Her voice broke. "I need to see this letter. I need to see it for myself." Robert retrieved Carol's confession, and we watched in silence as Megan read it, her hands shaking. When she finished, she looked up, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. $2 million, she said hollowly. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? The money." "No," Robert insisted. "This is about the truth. Your mother wanted you to know." Megan laughed bitterly. "The truth. After 36 years of lies." She stood, folding the letter carefully. "I need time to process this. Please don't follow me." She walked out, leaving us in a silence heavy with unspoken words and shattered certainties. The April sun filtered through the trees as I walked along the shore of Lake Champlain, exactly where it had all begun nearly 40 years ago. 3 months had passed since Carol's funeral, and the revelation that had fractured our family even further. Megan stood at the water's edge, skipping stones with practiced precision. She'd asked me to meet her here, at the lakeside cabin that now belonged to her, not through Carol and Robert, as we'd all assumed, but through Michael Calloway's family trust. "Thanks for coming," she said as I approached. "I needed someone who isn't directly involved in all the lies." I smiled wryly. "I think we're all involved, one way or another." After the initial shock, Megan had contacted Carol's attorney and confirmed everything. DNA testing had proven her biological connection to the Calloway family, and the trust had been transferred to her name. The cabin was part of that inheritance. "How's it going with the renovation?" I asked, nodding toward the rustic structure behind us. Megan had decided to restore the cabin rather than sell it, saying she needed to connect with this unexpected piece of her history. Slow, but therapeutic. She picked up another stone, examined it thoughtfully. "I found photos here. You know, of Michael, of Mom and your mother with him." She glanced at me. "It's strange seeing your face in someone you never knew existed." I nodded, understanding the disorienting feeling of discovering new pieces of your own puzzle. Since Carol's revelation, I'd been sorting through my own family history, questioning everything I thought I knew about my mother. "Have you talked to your dad, to Robert, lately?" I asked carefully. Megan's expression softened. "Yes. We're working through it. He's still my dad, DNA be damned. But there's a lot of hurt to process. And my mom," she skipped another stone, watching it bounce 5 times before sinking. "That's more complicated. I have questions only she can answer." We were silent for a moment, listening to the gentle lapping of water against the shore. In the 3 months, Since the funeral, each of us had retreated to process our grief and shock in different ways. Robert had thrown himself into woodworking, creating beautiful pieces from his pain. My mother had finally begun therapy, confronting decades of buried feelings. Megan had taken a leave of absence from her teaching position to renovate the cabin and explore her newfound heritage. And I had been the bridge between them all, trying to understand the complexities of love, betrayal, and family that had shaped us. I found something else, Megan said suddenly. Something Mom never mentioned in her letter. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small worn journal. It was hidden in a compartment under the window seat. I think it was Michael's. My heart quickened. Have you read it? She nodded. It's from that summer, 1985. It changes everything, Em. We sat on a fallen log as she opened the journal to a marked page. Listen to this entry from August 12th. Rebecca told me today that she's pregnant. I don't know what to do. I care for her, but I love Carol. I've made such a mess of everything. Rebecca insists she doesn't want anything from me, says she'll take care of it. I offered to support her, whatever she decides, but she just walked away. I stared at Megan, stunned. My mother was pregnant? Keep listening, Megan said, turning the page. August 20th. Carol and I walked by the lake today. I nearly told her about Rebecca, but couldn't bring myself to ruin what we have. Rebecca says she's going to a clinic in Burlington next week. She's made her choice, and I need to respect it. Still, I can't help wondering what might have been. My mind raced, trying to process this new information. Are you saying my mother had an abortion? I don't know, Megan said gently. The journal doesn't say explicitly, but there's more from September 5th. Ran into Rebecca in town today. She looked pale, distant. When I asked how she was, she just said, "It's done." I feel relieved and guilty all at once. Carol must never know about any of this. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by implications. Had my mother terminated a pregnancy with the man her sister later loved? Or was there another possibility? There's one more entry you should hear, Megan said. October 2nd, just days before Michael died. Rebecca confronted me today, says she's still pregnant, that she couldn't go through with the procedure. She wants nothing from me but thinks Carol should know the truth. I begged for time to figure things out. This will destroy everything. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. That's impossible, I whispered. I was born in April 1986. That timing would mean... Megan nodded slowly. That Michael Calloway could be your father too. I stood abruptly, needing air, needing space to think. If what the journal suggested was true, then my mother had carried a pregnancy she'd initially planned to terminate. After Michael died, she'd left Vermont briefly, returning married to my father, or the man I'd always believed was my father. Have you told anyone else about this? I asked when I could finally speak. No, Megan said. I thought you should be the first to know. We might be half-sisters, Emily. Half-sisters. The words echoed in my mind, bringing both confusion and a strange sense of rightness. Megan and I had always felt connected, even during the years our families had drifted apart. I need to talk to my mother, I said. I know. But first, there's something else I want to show you. Megan led me into the cabin, through the half-renovated living room to a small study. On the desk lay a stack of letters, the ones I'd found in Carol's wooden box. I've been reading these, Megan explained. Letters between Mom and Michael, and I found this. She handed me an envelope, postmarked October 15th, 1985, addressed to Carol from Rebecca Walker. Inside was a single page, my mother's handwriting, instantly recognizable. Carol, by the time you read this, I'll be gone from Vermont. I can't stay here. Not with everything that's happened. Michael's death has changed everything and nothing all at once. I know you loved him. I loved him too, in my way. The truth is, we both made choices we'll have to live with. You chose to pursue him knowing how I felt. I chose to keep secrets that will haunt me forever. I'm pregnant, Carol. It's Michael's child. I tried to end it, but couldn't go through with it. I don't expect you to understand or forgive me. I just needed you to know why I'm leaving and why I can't come back. Take care of yourself. Maybe someday we can find our way back to being sisters. Rebecca sat heavily in the desk chair, the letter trembling in my hands. She never sent it, I realized aloud. It was returned unopened. The envelope bore a return to sender stamp. Carol had never received it. I think that's why Mom never knew about your mother's pregnancy, Megan said, and why your mother thought Mom was being deliberately cruel when she announced her own pregnancy months later. The pieces were falling into place. The misunderstandings, the secrets, the gradual estrangement between the sisters. My mother had left Vermont carrying Michael's child, believing Carol knew about the pregnancy. Carol had discovered her own pregnancy after Michael's death, never knowing her sister was in the same situation. And my father, Jim Walker, he isn't my biological father, I said, the reality sinking in. That explains why he left when I was 12. He must have found out somehow. Megan sat beside me, taking my hand. What are you going to do? I looked at the letter, at the journal, at the faded photographs of two young women flanking a man whose features I could now see mirrored in both Megan's face and my own. I'm going to talk to my mother, I said. And then I think it's time we all sat down together. You, me, Robert, and my mom. No more secrets. 2 weeks later, we gathered at Robert and Carol's house. Now just Robert's house. My mother had confirmed everything. Her pregnancy, her failed attempt to tell Carol, her hasty marriage to Jim Walker when she was already 3 months pregnant. He'd known from the beginning that I wasn't biologically his, but had loved me as his own, until the strain of the secret eventually broke their marriage. Robert had been stunned by this additional revelation, but had welcomed me with open arms as Megan's half-sister. Carol would have loved knowing this, he'd said, tears in his eyes. She always thought of you as family anyway. As we sat around the dining table that evening, the four of us raised our glasses in a toast. To Carol, Robert said, who finally brought us the truth, even if she didn't know all of it herself. To Michael, my mother added softly, who gave us both daughters to be proud of. To new beginnings, Megan said, squeezing my hand. I looked around at these people, my family, complicated and flawed and real. To the family we choose, I finished, and the family that chose us. Later, as Megan and I walked in the garden, she asked, "Do you regret finding that letter? Sometimes I wonder if we'd have been better off not knowing." I considered this, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. No, I said finally. The truth was always there, shaping our lives whether we knew it or not. At least now we can understand why things happened the way they did. She nodded. I've been thinking about Mom's confession, why she chose to reveal everything after her death. I think she was trying to free us all. Free us? From the weight of secrets, from the half-truths that kept us all at a distance. Megan looked toward the house, where Robert and my mother were talking quietly on the porch, their silhouettes outlined against the warm light from inside. Look at them. They're healing too. It was true. In the weeks since we'd shared all our discoveries, something had shifted between Robert and my mother. The resentment had faded, replaced by a tentative friendship built on shared grief and understanding. What will you do with the inheritance? I asked. The Calloway money? Megan smiled. I've been thinking about that. Half of it is yours, by rights. I started to protest, but she held up her hand. But more importantly, I want to use it to establish a scholarship in Michael's name, and in Mom's, something that brings people together instead of driving them apart. I think that's perfect, I said, linking my arm through hers as we walked back toward the house. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. We all had adjustments to make, new identities to incorporate into our understanding of ourselves. But for the first time in decades, our family was free from the weight of unspoken truths. Carol's final confession had shattered the illusions we'd lived with for so long, but in their place, something stronger was emerging. A family bound not just by blood or secrets, but by choice, forgiveness, and love. As we rejoined Robert and my mother on the porch, I thought about Carol's letter, about the courage it had taken to write those words, knowing what they would unleash. In her final act, she had given us all the chance to rebuild what had been broken so long ago. And standing there in the fading light, surrounded by my complicated, imperfect family, I knew we would.